Comments within 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Mariano. I also run a website called thefullertoninformer.com. You know, I noticed that this is a pretty big building. When I pulled up in here, it obviously encompasses a lot of administrative offices and a lot of students. I guess this is a K through 12 system, and it's a pretty broad spectrum of demographic as well as ethnicity. And I think everyone here in this room, including up on the board, realizes that tyranny is a fact of life, whether it be your parents or even your own selves. I don't know how you got here or when you got here, but I'm sure you can all relate. The school districts have become the enforcement arm of a variety of what I believe are agendas. Vaccination is an agenda, as evidenced by how this law was enacted. Our legislators are bought and paid for. The lobbyists were up on the dais during the hearings, whispering in the ears of the legislators. It's unbelievable. The Disneyland measles outbreak involved no school-age children, and from my understanding, the strain of measles that was involved in that outbreak, the MMR vaccine has not been tested for efficacy against it. Now, with anything that's going to be forced on students as a condition of school entry, you would think that they would be tested for mutagenic potential, carcinogenic potential, or even impairment of fertility. I'm here to tell you a fact, ladies and gentlemen. On every vaccine insert in Section 13, it says no such thing has been done for the vaccinations. They have not been tested for impairment of fertility. I don't know if anybody in this room is from China. China has a one-child policy in the past, forced abortions, forced sterilizations. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very good possibility that we've laid the groundwork in this country for that. I hear all the talk about technology, and I couldn't help but be horrified as I sat in the trunk of my car. I have these reports from the military. This is a 40-year-old report from the Naval Medical Research Institute, and there are 2,000 citations on the dangers of microwave radiation, and we're bringing iPads into the classrooms. And you've probably never heard about this. Maybe the superintendent has, because I've been very vocal in other districts. But microwave radiation and wireless radiation has no place in the classroom. It is a dangerous thing. There's so much research out there. It's insane that this can be ignored for as long as it has. It's just going hand in hand with the insanity of forced vaccination. When we were forcing children to be exposed to a Class 2B carcinogen on the same level as lead, which is microwave radiation, as well as take vaccinations,
You have 30
upwards
seconds.
of 60 vaccinations, 65 vaccinations, that have not been tested for carcinogenic potential, mutagenic potential, or impairment of fertility. So I would urge all of you to agendize pushing back the PBE filing deadline to line up with the July 2016 implementation of SB 277. Thank you.
What do you think are the most serious issues faced by conservationists and World Wildlife Fund over the next 20 years or so?
95% of the whole of the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil has disappeared in the last 100 years. There is simply nowhere for these animals to live. At the basis of it all is this colossal increase in the human population. It's one of the living species of the planet, but it's reaching plague proportions.
Well, Big Brother will now be taught at a school near you. Across the country, schools are finding ways to track and monitor students inside and outside the classroom. The techniques range from chips embedded in school ID cards to GPS systems installed in computers, tracking students' every move, to actual surveillance cameras. And it's happening in Texas.
Somea's material can be stretched, folded, or crumpled up like paper, but the electronics on it still work. That's why it might be useful for biomedical applications.
and power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
This is a developmental system made by MC10, and it has an antenna and some sensors embedded in it. And what we plan to do is work with them to advance a tattoo that could be used for authentication.
So, so apparently this actually is artificial life, and it's able to grow.
They call that the nanotechnology.
Nanotechnology, imagine that.
Smart dust. This side you can see. What's happening here is what is inside, like this. This is from inside coming out.
Okay.
And it's nothing to do with the roots. Is more the matter is changing.
Okay.
And webbing, that's what the mission. See, the little one, that's why it's fractal. You have a big one and you have a small one. And when you look at the small one deeper, you can see there is a small one on top of the small one.
Up to how many times in terms of in micro sizes can you go in?
Oh, that one I can go to 1,000 times.
Oh boy, okay.
You see?
Oh, jeez.
So
Alright.
here, what's happened, he break. Okay, because for some reason, when you pick it up, the dust, or you know, so the head of the dust break. So after that, he go all over the place. 1,000 head go and he go on their ways.
Each one becomes one again and continues, and it just takes this.
And here you can see you have a glass on top of the glass. Okay, this is the lamelle, and on top of it there is another glass. So it's not my breath or something like that to make it them move.
Okay. It's
Because,
actually sandwiched inside.
Yeah,
there.
yes, it's a sandwich.
So if it's sandwiched inside there and it's still able to move the way we saw it move,
Yeah.
then
But for the wealthy elite, their fears went beyond things like insurrection. They were worried about the financial impact. Remember, it was not just the cotton plantations that profited from slavery. Whether you're talking about the banks or the insurance companies, the railroads, even the newspapers, the fact is that almost every aspect of the American economy was at some level or another invested in the slave business. You also need to recognize that for the wealthy elitist who controlled the system, slaves were an asset as long as they were slaves. But at the moment they are set free, they become a liability. And what the elite knew was that the end of slavery would instantly release 4 million people into the economy who had been kept uneducated and effectively unemployable anywhere but the cotton field. And what they were concerned about was that this was going to bankrupt the American economy. Taxes were going to go through the roof to take care of these people. Crime was going to be rampant. The prisons were going to be flooded. There was going to be this population overrun. And in the North, the biggest fear was migration from the South of these black people. The other fear that these people had was intermarriage between blacks and whites would lead to a loss of racial purity. The question was, what were they going to do about it? And their initial thought was that they would just send all the slaves back to Africa. This plan was called colonization, and it had broad support among the wealthy elite. In fact, the American Colonization Society was even funded by the United States Congress. But in the end, colonization proved to be unworkable, and the idea was eventually scrapped. But about that same time, a new philosophy was emerging in the world. It was called eugenics. And for some, it seemed like the perfect solution to what had become known as the Negro dilemma.
I do not join in the belief that the African is our equal in brain or in heart. And I believe that if we can, in any fair way, possess ourselves of his services, we have an equal right to utilize them to our advantage. Francis Galton, 1857.
Francis Galton is known as the father of eugenics. He actually coined the phrase eugenics. So he believed in trying to increase those he felt were superior in stock and decrease those he felt were inferior. Francis Galton came from a very wealthy family, a family that made its wealth from the slave trade. And what a lot of people don't know is that Francis Galton was a cousin to Charles Darwin. Francis Galton took Charles Darwin's philosophies and ideas and thoughts, and he actually put them into practice, and that's what we know today as eugenics. Eugenics and evolution are related in that they both see what they consider to be the highest form of primate, such as the gorilla, as almost indistinguishable from what they consider the lowest form of human, the African and the Aborigine.
At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Charles Darwin, 1890.
Charles Darwin is very well known for writing The Origin of Species in the 1800s. This book gave rise to evolutionary theory. What people don't know is that there was actually a longer original title to this book, and that was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life.
But they would hire crusaders to do the dirty work. And the primary one they settled upon was a woman named Margaret Sanger. She was the founder of the American Birth Control League and the publisher of its newsletter, the Birth Control Review. On a practical level, the relationship between Sanger and these elitists was basically a marriage of convenience. In order to advance their common agendas, they needed a front man and she needed money. And the whole thing would be held together by this kind of bizarre obsession with race and class. The result was that the American Birth Control League became the driving force behind the American eugenics movement. Eugenics would no longer just be a philosophy. Sanger and others like her were going to put it into practice.
We are paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. Margaret Sanger, 1922.
The laws of nature require the obliteration of the unfit, and human life is valuable only when it is of use to the community or race. Madison Grant, 1916.
The ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government run by the banking industry, run by the bankers, and they're doing it in sections. The European currency, the euro, and the European Constitution is one part of it. Now they're trying to do it in America with the North American Union, right? And they want to create a new currency called the Amero, right? And the whole agenda is to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is getting me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do, what
everything,
you sell.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one-world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people, and you become a slave. You become a serf.
1931, quote, "There will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it, because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution." Zbigniew Brzezinski worked in the Carter administration, just passed recently. This is from Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, 1970. The technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date, complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities. Shortly, the public will be unable to reason or think for themselves. They will only be able to parrot the information they've been given on the previous night's news. Zbigniew Brzezinski. The chip is loaded with more than 5 billion transistors and boasts more than 250 million synapses or programmable logic points. This is how deep the technology goes. Ray Kurzweil, futurist. By the time we get to the 2040s, we'll be able to multiply human intelligence a billionfold. That will be a profound change that's singular in nature. Computers are going to keep getting smaller and smaller. Ultimately, they will go inside our bodies and brains and make us healthier, make us smarter. And by the 2030s, the non-biological portion of our intelligence will predominate. Ray Kurzweil. Healthcare Act. Obamacare in the 1,000 pages in the U.S. Healthcare Bill is a non-discussed Subtitle C11, Section 2521, National Medical Device Registry, which states its purpose as provides the framework for making the United States the first nation in the world to require each and every one of its citizens to implant in them a radio frequency identification microchip for the purpose of controlling who is or who isn't allowed medical care in their country.
And he provides that no one will be able to buy or to sell except the one that has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666.
Anyone who takes the mark is immediately thrown into the lake of fire. There's no grace, there's no mercy. It's just, you've got the mark, bam, you're in the lake of fire.